What if I told you that a woman who lives alone is not unlucky in love, she's living out one of the most misunderstood stages in the human relationship cycle? What if I told you Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, spoke of women who would step away from partnership, not because they couldn't find a man, but because their souls, hearts, and futures demanded it? Imagine this: you close the door to your own home at night. There is no other voice calling your name. No footsteps in the hallway but your own. Some people call it loneliness. You call it peace. Today, we're revealing 7 truths about women who live alone without a man, truths that might surprise you, and might just change how you see yourself, your relationships, and your future. Between 1901 and 1944, Edgar Cayce gave more than 14,000 trance readings. Some of them were about health, some about lost civilizations, and some, though fewer people know this, were about love, relationships, and the roles men and women would play in the decades to come. In several readings, Cayce described a season of independence, a period in a woman's life when she might step away from romantic partnership entirely. Not as a failure, but as a reset. A spiritual and emotional recalibration. He said that in the future, more women would live alone by choice than ever before. And that this choice would be tied to both personal empowerment and a larger shift in human consciousness. Virginia Beach, 1935. A woman named Margaret sits across from Cayce. She's 39, divorced, and has no plans to remarry. Her friends whisper about her behind her back. She leans forward and asks, almost in a whisper, "Am I meant to be alone forever?" Cayce, in trance, responds, "Alone. You are not alone when you are with your purpose. This is your season to know yourself without the weight of another's will. The love you seek may yet come, but first, you must become the woman who can choose freely, rather than need." Margaret leaves that room lighter. She realizes she's not in limbo. She's in a sacred interval. Many women who live alone have known relationships, and they've known the cost of staying in ones that drain them. Cayce often spoke about vibrations in relationships. The subtle but constant exchange of emotional and spiritual energy. If a partnership lowers your vibration, he said, it affects every part of your well-being. Psychologists confirm that high-conflict relationships increase stress hormones, weaken the immune system, and even shorten lifespan. So she chooses peace. For walls and quiet are better than a shared bed and constant storms. Would you rather explain your solitude to others, or explain to yourself why you stayed in misery? Cayce believed every soul had its own cycles, periods for learning, building, loving, or resting. Women living alone often follow their own timing instead of rushing into partnership to meet social expectations. Sociological studies show women who marry later tend to report higher relationship satisfaction and lower divorce rates, because they enter with clearer self-knowledge. She knows she's not behind, she's simply aligned with her own calendar. Whose clock are you living by? Yours, or theirs? One of Cayce's most repeated relationship messages was this: like attracts like. Lowering your standards out of fear attracts exactly what you don't want. Many women living alone would rather have no partner than settle for one who doesn't match their values, energy, or vision. Relationship researchers call this selective investment, the understanding that emotional energy is precious, and giving it to the wrong person costs more than being alone. If you had to choose between temporary company and lasting self-respect, which would you choose? Cayce often told clients their relationship struggles weren't just about this life, they were part of karmic patterns, carried over from before. Some women live alone now because they are consciously refusing to repeat unhealthy cycles, with partners, with family, or with themselves. Therapists see this as pattern interruption. Breaking generational or personal cycles by making a dramatically different choice. She's not avoiding love. She's making space for a different kind of love. Reflection: are you living your own story, or replaying someone else's? Cayce advised many single clients to fill your life with the work, the friends, the beauty, and the service that bring you joy, for these are the magnets that will draw the right soul to you, or make you so fulfilled you no longer crave one. Studies on happiness show that life satisfaction depends more on daily habits and environment than on relationship status. She travels. She decorates her space her way. She wakes up without compromise. And if love comes, it will find her already complete. If you never met the one, would your life still feel full? Cayce warned against letting self-worth depend on how others treat you. He saw it as a spiritual trap, one that kept people repeating the same relationship mistakes. Women who live alone often have already learned, sometimes the hard way, that they don't need a man's attention to feel valuable. Psychologists call this internal locus of self-esteem. Your confidence comes from within, making you less vulnerable to unhealthy relationships. Do you measure your worth by who wants you, or by who you've become? Cayce believed love could arrive at any stage of life, but he advised never to wait for it passively. Women who thrive alone live fully now, leaving the door open for love, but never letting their home, or heart, feel empty in the meantime. Research shows that people who maintain rich social lives, hobbies, and personal goals are more attractive to partners and enjoy healthier relationships when they do enter them. She's not hiding. She's simply refusing to put her life on hold for someone else's arrival. What would your days look like if you stopped waiting and started living? These 7 truths aren't just about women who live alone, they're about power, choice, and love that begins within. Cayce's wisdom and modern research agree, a woman who lives fully without a man is not rejecting love, she's raising the standard for it. And in doing so, she changes not only her own life, but the entire conversation about what partnership should be. Now it's your turn. Which of these truths do you see in yourself, or in a woman you admire? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one, and if your words add to this conversation, I'll mark them with a heart. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, a sister, a friend, maybe even yourself in a moment of doubt. Subscribe and hit the bell, because in future episodes we'll dive deeper into Edgar Cayce's relationship readings, love predictions, and the cycles of partnership he saw unfolding for our time. And remember, you're not alone, even if you live alone. What if I told you that living alone, truly alone, without a man, is not a sign of loneliness or failure, but a calling? What if I told you Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, foresaw a time when certain women would choose this path not out of bitterness, but because their souls were answering a higher summons? Imagine you, in your own quiet home, the sound of rain against the window, no footsteps but your own, yet feeling more connected to life, to the universe, than ever before. In a world that constantly tells you a woman's value is measured by her relationships, what if the greatest relationship you could ever have, was with your own soul? Stay with me, because the 7 truths you're about to hear may not only change the way you see single women, they may change the way you see yourself. Between 1901 and 1944, Edgar Cayce delivered more than 14,000 trance readings. Some were about health, others about past lives, Atlantis, the afterlife. And some, surprisingly, touched on the evolving role of women. In several readings, Cayce spoke of the awakening of the feminine soul, a time when women would increasingly choose independence, not because they couldn't find a partner, but because their souls required space to remember their purpose. He described this as both a challenge and an initiation, a spiritual stage where the absence of a partner could be the very thing that opens the door to higher consciousness. But here's the mystery: Cayce hinted at 7 distinct truths that these women would eventually embody. Truths that would set them apart, guide them, and ultimately allow them to impact the world in ways they never could have within the constraints of old patterns. Today, as millions of women worldwide live alone by choice, we can see these truths unfolding, and modern science, psychology, and sociology are beginning to echo what Cayce said decades ago. It's 1932. Virginia Beach. The Depression is biting into every corner of America. In a modest wooden house near the shoreline, Cayce lies on a couch in his reading room, his breathing deep and slow. Across from him sits a 42-year-old widow named Eleanor. She has no children, no surviving family. She works as a seamstress and spends her evenings reading philosophy. Her neighbors call her eccentric, a woman her age, living alone, refusing every proposal she's received. She asks Cayce in a trembling voice. Is there something wrong with me? Why am I so content in my own company? In trance, Cayce's voice deepens. It is not wrong. It is chosen. Your soul seeks its own counsel in this life, for it prepares to serve in ways that partnership would hinder. What you call solitude is the forging of the soul's clear channel. Eleanor leaves that day with tears in her eyes, but they are tears of relief. She understands now that she's not incomplete. She's in training. The first truth Cayce revealed is that some women live alone because their soul requires spiritual autonomy, the freedom to explore inner worlds without constant negotiation of outer demands. Cayce taught that the soul needs periods of uninterrupted self-knowing. In partnership, compromise is constant. Alone, a woman can hear the subtle voice of her own higher self without distortion. Neuroscience now shows that solitude enhances the brain's ability to process self-referential thought. MRI scans reveal increased activity in the default mode network, the brain's introspection hub, when people are alone in calm environments. Have you noticed that when you're alone, the chatter fades, and something deeper starts to speak? Cayce often spoke of past lives influencing present choices. He said some women living alone in this era have carried forward spiritual commitments from previous incarnations, vows of service, vows of learning, vows of non-attachment. In one reading, he described a woman who had been a healer in ancient Egypt, working in temple service, never marrying. In her current life, she felt no urgency for partnership, because her soul was continuing its temple work, this time in the temple of her own mind and body. Psychologists call this life-theme consistency, recurring patterns in identity and purpose across a person's lifetime that seem to arise from beyond conscious choice. What if your preference for independence isn't new, but centuries old? Cayce taught that we are not just flesh and bone, we are fields of energy. And some women have especially sensitive energetic systems that absorb and mirror the emotions of those around them. Living alone, for these women, isn't isolation, it's energetic self-preservation. Without the constant proximity of another's field, they can maintain clarity, heal faster, and create without interruption. Studies in empathic sensitivity show that some individuals have measurably stronger mirror neuron activity, making them more susceptible to emotional contagion. Have you ever felt drained just from being in someone else's presence too long? For some, solitude is not the destination, it's the training ground. Cayce described it as the season of honing the tool before its work. He gave an example of a woman in the 1940s who longed to travel and teach. In trance, Cayce told her, "Use these years alone to sharpen the mind, discipline the body, and anchor the spirit. For the time will come when your work will demand every ounce of you." Sociologists note that people who have lived alone often enter later relationships or public roles with stronger boundaries and clearer purpose, because they've learned who they are apart from others' expectations. What if your current solitude is the forging of your greatest future chapter? Cayce rejected the idea that wholeness must come from a romantic partner. He spoke of the marriage of the soul to the spirit, an inner union where the conscious and subconscious mind align with the higher self. In his view, a woman who achieves this inner union can live with deep fulfillment, whether or not she ever marries. Positive psychology research calls this self-concordance. When your goals align with your authentic values, life satisfaction rises dramatically, independent of relationship status. Could your most important relationship be the one you have with your own soul? Some women, Cayce said, are born into family lines where generations repeated the same dysfunctional dynamics. Choosing to live alone can be a deliberate break in that chain, a conscious refusal to pass down the same patterns. A woman in a Cayce reading had grown up watching her mother and grandmother endure abusive marriages. In trance, Cayce told her that by living independently, she was changing the vibration of the family line. Epigenetic research suggests that emotional trauma can influence gene expression, and that changing life patterns can alter that expression for future generations. Could your solitude be a form of healing for those who come after you? Finally, Cayce describes certain women as anchors of light, souls who live alone so they can serve in ways that require flexibility, availability, and focus. Without the constraints of partnership, they can respond to needs, caring for aging parents, mentoring, volunteering, creating art, or spiritual work, with a freedom others might envy. Philanthropic studies show that single women contribute disproportionately to volunteer work and community projects compared to other demographics. If no one is sharing your home, could it be because your soul is sharing itself with the world? These 7 truths are not rules, they're revelations. They're the quiet threads Cayce saw running through the lives of women who live alone, by choice or circumstance. From spiritual autonomy to sacred service, from breaking ancestral patterns to preserving energetic sovereignty, each truth is a facet of a larger reality. That a woman's value is not measured by whether she has a man, but by whether she is living the life her soul came here to live. And perhaps that's the most radical truth of all. Now I want to hear from you. Have you experienced any of these truths in your own life? Which of them speaks most to your heart? Share your story in the comments. I read every one, and if your words add to this conversation, I'll mark it with a heart. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, maybe a sister, a friend, or even yourself in a moment of doubt, share this video with them. Subscribe and hit the bell, because in future episodes, we'll explore more of Edgar Cayce's hidden readings, the ones that speak to our time, our struggles, and our awakening. Remember, you are not alone, even if you live alone. The soul that walks in truth is always in company with the light.